While the world has grown accustomed to viewing trade wars through the lens of loud declarations and grandiose sanctions, in reality, the most dangerous form of confrontation unfolds in silence. Without shouting, without noise, without warning. It all begins with a single phone call, a short message on a trading terminal, or a small bulletin buried among hundreds of other news items. That is exactly how it happened this time. In a matter of hours, China made it clear to the United States. The era of trust is over, and the era of strategic disengagement has begun. The first alarm sounded at the moment when a cargo ship, loaded with American soybeans, was halfway across the Pacific Ocean. The message that hit trading terminals in Singapore was brief. China cancels all American soybean shipments immediately. By noon, 2.4 million tons had been rerouted toward Brazil, and by sunset, contracts worth more than $1 billion had vanished. This was not merely a trade disruption, it was a signal. 30% of China's typical monthly soybean purchases were suddenly cut off. And according to economists at Rabobank, this was not about a short-term game of nerves. It marked the beginning of a structural reconfiguration of the entire global food supply chain. The U.S. Department of Agriculture reported a 13% increase in domestic soybean stocks, a record figure for April since the year 2019. Commodity prices on the Chicago Board of Trade collapsed by 8.2% within just a few days, wiping out more than $470 million in commodity value in a single week. Farmers in Iowa, Ohio, and Nebraska felt the impact immediately. They were thrown overboard without a plan B. According to Matt Dunn, a fourth-generation farmer from Des Moines, this is no longer a trade war, it is economic isolation. The American Soybean Association estimated that income losses could reach 18% in just one quarter. On the surface, it appeared to be a retaliation for new U.S. tariffs against Chinese electronics and electric vehicle components. But in reality, China struck where America was most vulnerable: agriculture. Soybeans were not just an ordinary commodity. In the year 2024, soybean exports to China totaled $14.3 billion and represented the largest component of bilateral trade. Moreover, it was a direct blow to the political base of the then president, the agricultural states of the Midwest. But behind the scenes, a deeper strategy was unfolding. Over the past few years, Brazil had invested more than $11 billion into developing logistics for soybean exports, terminals, railways, and transport corridors. All of this took place with financial backing from Chinese state banks. It was not a coincidence. It was a carefully constructed exit strategy. Why was China willing to overpay up to $22 per ton for Brazilian soybeans? The answer is simple. Strategic control is worth more than short-term profit. In essence, Beijing demonstrated to the entire world that it could abandon American agricultural products without risking a food crisis. The official reason: phytosanitary concerns. However, no real violations in American soybeans were recorded. This allowed China to bypass World Trade Organization mechanisms without imposing formal sanctions. China's approach: sanctions without sanctions, pressure without formal threats. And just as the market was trying to digest this event, another blow landed. Exactly at 2:42 a.m. Beijing time, an order was issued to cancel 12,000 tons of American pork that was already en route. No explanations, no suggestions for redirection. Just a complete annulment of deals worth more than $35 million. It could hardly be called a coincidence. Just 3 weeks earlier, the Trump administration had imposed a 172% anti-dumping duty on Chinese pork. China did not respond with mirror measures, did not stage a spectacle. It simply canceled the largest American pork import contract in 5 years. The effect was immediate. Within 24 hours, the largest meat processing plant in Worth County laid off 117 workers. Live hog prices collapsed by 6.5% in 3 days. Major producers like Tyson Foods and Hormel lost up to 4% of their market capitalization. But more importantly, China began replacing suppliers. Already in April, Brazilian pork exports to China increased by 28%, while Spanish pork exports rose by 23%. For the first time in many years, the U.S. market share in China's meat sector fell below 20%. China's strategy was clear: not just to diversify, but to replace, and to do so at the most painful moment for American agriculture. If anyone thinks this is only about soybeans and pork, they should look at the bigger picture. In the first quarter of the year, 2025, U.S. corn exports to China fell by 29%, and beef exports nearly halved. China signed long-term food contracts with Brazil, Argentina, and Russia. According to HSBC, more than 70% of China's grain and oilseed imports will now come from outside the United States. The intrigue only grows. What will be next? The question is no longer about a short-term trade war. The question is about a strategic rupture, and it is being done without loud declarations or threats. Instead, there are silent, methodical actions. A canceled contract here, a renegotiation of terms there, a change in sanitary standards without warning. A provocative question: what if the next step is not food, but technology or finance? The trade wars between the United States and China could enter a new phase, where the main target will not only be food, but also rare earth metals, semiconductors, and perhaps even the dollar itself. American farmers are already suffering, but the real threat is much bigger: the weakening of financial stability, the rise of internal protest sentiments, and the decline of U.S. influence on the global stage. In essence, China has demonstrated that it can replace one of its largest suppliers within a matter of days without even blinking. And if it was possible with agriculture, who can guarantee that tomorrow a similar scenario will not unfold in far more critical sectors? A promise: it can only get tougher from here. China is only beginning to build its alternative supplier, sending in money chains. The true consequences for America will not be felt now, but in 1 or 2 years when the markets have fully redistributed. America, of course, will attempt to counterattack. Negotiations are already underway with Japan, South Korea, and Latin American countries to compensate for losses in the Chinese market. But the real question is, will new partners be willing to fully replace China, or will they prefer to keep their distance? Contrasting opinions. American officials reassure that this is temporary, but export decline statistics suggest otherwise. Appeal to emotions. Share your opinion in the comments. Do you believe the United States will be able to regain its lost positions, or is this the beginning of the end of America's global dominance?